Hello there, and welcome to Murder Most British. I'm Zach.
And I'm Rachel. Hello and welcome.
Yes, welcome. Glad to have you here. So, this week we are off to Northern Ireland.
Yeah, I'm back this week. I wasn't in last week.
Oh yeah,
I had a day off.
How was your day off?
It was lovely. It was really nice. Obviously, I do enjoy doing this. So
Yeah.
But yeah, a nice day off for me. It was very enjoyable.
That was definitely a case for Fauna to jump in with all the witchy, spooky stuff. So that was a really, really fun episode to do. So now we're back with the host with the most.
Me?
Yeah.
Calm down, boy. Calm down. Right.
So before we step into today's case, just a small request from us.
If you'd like to support the show directly and unlock ad-free episodes, bonus cases, 24-hour early access, Q&As and live streams, you can join us over on Patreon at patreon.com/murdermostbritishpodcast. You'll find all our socials, Discord and Patreon in the link tree in the description below.
If you enjoy these stories that we tell here in the archive, please follow the show and leave a 5-star rating. It genuinely helps others discover what we do.
Yes, definitely. And your support keeps the archive open and ensures no story is ever forgotten. This episode contains discussion of domestic murder, coercive control, sexual violence and blackmail allegations. It also includes references to suicide, so some listeners may find this content distressing. Listener discretion is strongly advised. Let's get to the story.
In a place where people cross the border every day, disappearing did not always look impossible. Sometimes there was a reason. Sometimes there was a rumor. Sometimes there was a lie. So when Gerry McGinley vanished in August of 2002, there was a story ready-made already at once. They had left before dawn, afraid he was about to be set up again. At first, it sounded possible. But the longer he stayed gone, the more the story had to carry. A troubled marriage, a hidden affair, and a house where too many things were already changing. Piece by piece, the explanation began to fall apart.
Gerald McGinley, known as Gerry, came from Manor Hamilton in County Leitrim. From a family later described locally as respectable. People who knew him spoke of him as a devoted son and a father deeply attached to his 2 daughters. By the summer of 2000, he was 34 years old and had built a life that moved easily across the border between the Republic and Northern Ireland, working first in haulage and later in furniture.
He came across as energetic and ambitious, always on to the next deal, the next vehicle, the next plan. But there was another side to him too. In 1985, Gerry was convicted of raping the wife of a Garda officer and sentenced to 9 years in prison. He served time in Arbor Hill and Castlerea, then later moved to Enniskillen after his release. That conviction, though, never really stopped following him around.
Yeah, I wouldn't have thought that that's quite a strong conviction. So
yeah, you're being
people would have been.
You saw, well, what'd you go to jail for? That's really tough. I mean, I don't feel sorry for him.
No,
shouldn't have done something like that because that's fucking horrific.
It is a long time out, and the people that knew him probably would have been like, "Oh, where have you been? I haven't seen you in like 9 years." That helps explain why he was later described as a man who had built up suspicion and enemies on both sides of the border. Then there was Julie McGinley. She was younger than Gerry and came from what later accounts described as a stable and respected local family. As a teenager, she had been injured in the Enniskillen bomb of 1987, in which 11 people were killed and 63 were injured. A 12th victim later died after spending years in a coma.
Jesus.
Yeah, it was quite a horrific time.
That's fucking bad. Well, a few years later, she met Gerry, and by the mid-1990s, they were married. They lived in Derryraghan near Ballinamallard and had 2 young daughters, Shannon and Carly. Julie had worked in customer service for British Telecom and outwardly, they looked like any other ordinary household. Children, work, routine, even if the marriage underneath it was much less stable.
Well, under the surface, there had already been infidelities, periods of separation, and years of strain. In 1997, things got so bad that Gerry attempted suicide. By the end of the 1990s, this was not a marriage going through one bad spell. It was a relationship that had already been under serious pressure for years.
And by then, the strain in the marriage had begun to bleed into the world around it, including business. Gerry had moved into the furniture trade in Enniskillen, and it was there that Michael Monaghan came into the picture. He was older, married, and had a family of his own in County Sligo. But he was soon in regular contact with both Gerry and Julie. In time, that working relationship gave way to something far more personal. Uh-oh.
Yeah, well, by early 2000, it did not take long for people to notice the pattern. Witnesses later described Julie turning up specifically to see Monaghan. Often shortly after he arrived at work, sometimes several times a day. And it did not take long for people to realise that she was there for him.
Yeah, just for him.
I mean, if you're married,
that's not being...
It's a bit too close to home, isn't it?
Yeah, that's not being, secretive about it.
Not very
she
discreet
shows up,
at all, yeah.
It's like right after you get to work. You're like, hey, what are you doing here? Oh, I'm here to see you. Wow, and everybody around going, what the fuck?
Yeah, they've clearly got some sort of relationship going.
Oh, yeah. Well, some people also recalled hearing that Julie was unhappy in her marriage. She wanted out and was even talking about getting as far away as Australia. That's pretty
bad if you want to travel all the way from here from Northern Ireland to Australia.
Yeah, I want to get so fucking far away from you that I'm going to move to Australia. Whatever had started between her and Monaghan was no longer innocent by then. It had become a full-blown affair. People later said that they had seen them together in parked cars around the Tempo Road Business Park, and one witness said they saw them having sex in a car outside the furniture business.
Damn, there's a bit of dog in there.
Well, come on.
People walking past seeing all this?
Yeah, but they're right outside the business that your husband owns.
Jesus Christ.
What are you doing? That's not being discreet.
She didn't care, does she?
I guess not.
Getting her kicks. Well, the affair, that was only one part of the bigger picture. There were also repeated claims that Gerry and Julie were running a blackmail scheme, with Julie allegedly taking men back to hotel rooms, including rooms at the Fort Lodge, and having sex with them while Gerry secretly filmed the encounters.
Jesus.
Some of those tapes were then allegedly used to extort money from those men. At least one man was said to have paid £2,500 to stop the video getting out. And even if every corner of that world is hard to pin down now, the picture by 2000 is clear enough. Secrecy, pressure, and the constant risk of exposure.
Good Lord. They're into some crazy shit.
Yes. But then if he's, maybe Gerry is not actually worried about her having this affair if he's actually willing to let her sleep with other men and,
Well, that seems more
terrible.
like a go do this.
Yeah.
So we can get some money.
Seems like he's in control of doing that sort of side of things, to be fair.
Kind of controlling her to do things that maybe she doesn't want to do.
Mm.
Well, then in January of 2000, something happened that clearly shook him. Gerry was stopped after the Gardaí were tipped off by an informant that he was transporting drugs across the border, despite the fact that he was actually traveling across into the South on legitimate business to sell a lorry. What was found under this driver's seat was meant to look devastating, but it soon became clear that it was not what it had seemed at first. In fact, part of what was supposed to be hard drugs turned out to be kitchen spices. And the wider claim of a major drug run quickly fell apart.
Wow.
Gerry was told he was unlikely to face any sort of prosecution and that there was no question of prison time. He came away believing someone had tried to frame him.
Well, yeah, I should expect that. If it's just kitchen spices, you're not going to get prison time for smuggling kitchen spices.
Well, trying to set someone up like that and just putting fucking oregano or something. Oh, this looks like weed. Oh, yeah, here we go.
Imagine it.
Or like, here's some baking powder. It looks like cocaine. Oh.
Jesus Christ. Well, after that, he wouldn't let it go. He contacted the Gardaí repeatedly, pressed for the identity of the informant, and spoke about the whole thing as something done to him rather than some piece of bad luck. The fact that the case was going nowhere did not settle him either. What mattered now was who had tried to do it. And in one later conversation, he warned that if anything happened to him, a lot of things would come out and the Gardaí would know he had been set up.
Oh, yeah, it's pretty obvious, but if you can't really trace exactly who it was or anything, like if it's just an anonymous tip over the phone or whatever.
Yeah. But then what with his previous conviction, who's to say, it is possible that the Gardaí, that he had raped the wife of, who's to say he ain't trying to set him up? Do you know what I mean? After all these years, just to get some revenge. Who knows?
Well, also with the cops, they were like, no, this looks like a setup where we're not, going to try to screw you over for it.
Jerry needs to just drop it. I mean, it was like some spices, a bit of inconvenience. Do you know what I mean? He didn't go to jail.
But then it's like, well, how far are these people going to go? Are they going to go further than that?
That is true, yeah.
Other reporting went further and cast it as an earlier attempt to get him out of the way. So by August of 2000, several strands were already tangled together. A marriage in trouble, an affair that was no longer really hidden, money problems, allegations of blackmail, and Jerry's growing conviction that somebody close to him had moved against him.
Well, on Saturday, the 12th of August 2000, Gerry brought the clothes that he would wear that night, a shirt, jeans and shoes. He was seen at the furniture shop and appeared to be in good spirits. He spoke about the days ahead, business, an orthopedic bed he meant to supply to Robert Elliott.
I'm getting a whole new fit to go out in.
Yeah.
Shit. Well, that evening, Gerry arranged for a babysitter. Julie later said she made him a hot whiskey before they left for the Fort Lodge Hotel. Ugh. I mean, room temperature or with some ice.
Yeah,
well, I guess. We'll throw some honey in it. Well, Monaghan was there, and so was Patrick McPadden, a Ballinamore man who was then living with Monaghan in a flat on Ann Street in Enniskillen.
Well, that night, Gerry drank about 6 to 8 pints, but not, it seems, to a level that was wildly unusual for him. At about 2:30 in the morning, he and Julie arrived back at Derryraghan, with Julie going into the house first. She later said that she had phoned ahead from the hotel to say that they would be late, but the babysitter said that she never received the call. Julie then drove the babysitter home.
So as they were leaving, the babysitter caught a brief glimpse of a man in a white t-shirt coming around the side of the house and going inside. When she asked where Gerry was, Julie said he was around the back of the house. Nothing in that brief exchange hinted at what was coming next.
Sometime in the early hours of the 13th of August, after Gerry had gone to bed, the violence began. He was almost certainly asleep when the first blow landed. The medical evidence later suggested that the strike hit his forehead with such tremendous force that it likely knocked him unconscious straight away. He had no warning and in all probability no real chance to defend himself. He was hit again and again with a heavy blunt object. Gerry died right there in his own home while his 2 young daughters slept nearby.
Jesus.
Very brutal.
Yeah, but I mean, I thought of it like he didn't know what happened.
No.
Like if the first hit just completely blacked out, done.
Yeah.
And then he didn't know what happened to him.
Which, I think if anything, you would want that. You wouldn't really necessarily want to know what's going on. If it's going to be a something that's going to result in death, I'd rather
just
be knocked
out
and unconscious and not actually be aware of what the hell they're doing to me.
But then also on the other side is cowardly.
Yeah.
Absolute coward.
Definitely.
They fucking people that did that, just cowards. What followed was not panic. It was concealment. Gerry's body was moved out of the house. He was stripped of clothing and personal items, wrapped in black plastic sheeting, and taken across the border into County Leitrim. He was left in a remote woodland near Ballinamore, in the hope that he would never be found. Back in Derryraghan, the room where Gerry had been killed was altered quickly, and traces of that night were removed.
Well, and around Gerry's disappearance, an explanation was soon being given. The story was that he had got up early on Sunday morning, taken £1,000 in cash, and gone off in a Republic registered car with another man because he feared being set up by the Gardaí again. He drew directly on the fear he had already been voicing since Black Lion. To anyone hearing it at a distance, it had just enough logic to sound possible, but that story did not hold for long.
So by mid-August of 2000, Gerry's family were no longer thinking of this as a temporary disappearance. His father, Gerald Sr., had been in nearly daily contact with him, and when that suddenly stopped, alarm set in quickly. By Tuesday night, the 15th of August, Julie had phoned to say Gerry was gone. But to those who knew him best, something about it just didn't sit right.
Police initially handled it as a missing person inquiry, but Gerry was not formally reported missing by Julie until the 17th of August, 4 days after he had last been seen alive. By that stage, officers were not starting with a blank page because Julie had already given a detailed account of where Gerry was supposed to have gone and why.
Quite early on, parts of that story began to fray. When an RUC, or Royal Ulster Constabulary, one of their officers later came to the house over a £50 parking fine, Julie simply said Gerry had gone away for a while. Around the same time, a neighbor who had been rebuilding a vintage tractor with Gerry was so unsettled, and so put out by Julie's attitude, that he threatened to report Gerry missing himself if she did not.
Gerry's family were also starting to push for answers of their own. His father and brother went to see Monaghan, who had said that he had last seen Gerry when the shop had closed on the Saturday evening and claimed that he had not been at the house on the Sunday. But the more people asked, the less straightforward the story seemed.
Yeah. I mean, geez, the neighbor was more concerned than she was.
Yeah.
It's like, man, what the fuck?
Yeah.
Go report him missing or I'm going to do it.
Yep.
Well, then attention shifted more sharply to Derryraghan. Within days, investigators found a house that did not sit easily with the story of a voluntary disappearance. The marital bedroom had been rapidly stripped and refitted, and police would later say they believed evidence was already being destroyed at that point. On that same Sunday afternoon, on the 13th, Gerry McGinley saw Julie at Mullen Market. He said she looked tired, went straight to a bedding stall, bought fresh bedding, and behaved as though there was nothing out of the ordinary to explain. Uh-oh.
Well, later that same day, when the babysitter and her sister returned a child's quad bike, Julie came outside with the children instead of letting them in. One of the sisters said it was the only time that had ever happened and that Julie seemed like she wanted to get rid of them. It's like, usually I let you guys in, but
no cup of tea for you.
No one's coming in this house, bye. Inside, the bedroom had been repainted, refurnished, and fitted with new curtains. Josephine McElroy later identified them as curtains that she had previously given to Monaghan.
Oh.
Well, she also said that Julie was evasive about where they had come from. Around the same time, McElroy said Julie had asked her what prison was like and what it took to put someone there.
Oh, that's not suspicious.
Yeah, why would you ask, if you would only ask that question, oh, what's jail like, if you're genuinely interested in their experience, or you know you've done something that you may go to jail for.
Well, my husband's been missing for a few days, and
Yeah.
what's prison like?
Mm.
What does it exactly take for them to put you in jail?
Yeah.
That's so
it's not
fucking
questions
suspicious.
That, it just seems very, very suspicious.
Well, now Gerry's mobile phone, passport, and wedding ring had been left behind as well. Taken together, those were not the signs of a man who had tidily walked away from his own life. Witnesses also said Monahan was speaking as if Gerry would not be coming back almost immediately after his disappearance. There was also evidence placing both Monahan and McPadden at the house that Sunday that he said that he wasn't there.
Yep.
Yeah. He later said that they had gone there under the pretense of buying a van,
Oh.
but then told Gerry's dad, no, we weren't there.
So what's that tell you? Inconsistencies.
Yeah, not keeping things straight.
Yeah, if you're telling the truth on something, there's not going to be no inconsistencies in your story.
Yep.
No matter who you're talking to.
It's harder to remember the lies
exactly.
than it is the truth.
And people still don't think about that, you know?
No matter how
Honestly.
rehearsed you think you are, you're going to mess up.
The amount of, crimes that we've seen, like watched and stuff and read about, they just all don't think logically at all.
The lies fall apart so quickly.
And this is what makes police so flipping clever, because they're just like, okay, you said this, and now you're saying that, so clearly you're not telling the truth.
Well, there was like that episode of on body cam stuff last night.
Yeah.
Where the guy was like, I've been a police officer for 25 years. I've been lied to so much.
Yeah.
And you've lied to me. It's not going to be the last time I'm lied to. But I know when people are lying to me. You just can't. They're so used to it.
Trained in having the instinct to be lie detectors. They can tell whether you're lying or not. You know, they look at everything, body language. You know what you've said to one person, what you're saying to another.
Yeah,
honestly. Well, Sergeant William Stevenson later said that he asked Julie whether she wanted to report Gerry missing and whether she had a photograph of him, but she didn't provide one. Suspicion grew quickly in the next 11 days after Gerry's disappearance, and by the 24th of August, this was no longer a missing person case, but a murder investigation.
Yeah, I would say so. Well, the investigators dug deeper, and they found that Julie had 5 mobile phones in 2000. And I had 1, and that was enough.
Yeah.
3 of them were in her own name. Or whose names in the other 2? Some aliases?
No. Who knows? I mean, maybe Gerry got them for her and put them in his name, but...
That's like drug dealer shit.
Yeah,
I got 5 phones.
That's definitely suspicious shit.
Well, one of them reportedly contained graphic love messages between her and Monahan.
Oh, their secret love phones.
Yeah. Police also found writing in Monahan's notebook that appeared to be love messages to Julie. And on a phone linked to him, there was a message reading, quote, Mick, I love you.
Well, there was money in the background too. The business was under strain and there were debts. But Gerry was also insured for £310,000.
Ooh-wee.
A lot of money. Alongside the affair and everything else already circling the case, that was another possible motive that investigators couldn't ignore. They were also working through what had happened to the clothes Gerry was said to have worn when he left. The same shirt, jeans and shoes he had brought the previous day and worn to the Fort Lodge. Police later said that they brought matching items and that debris recovered from the yard fires was consistent with those clothes. They also found charred hinges from wardrobe doors that had been taken off in the bedroom. Yeah.
Well, the Black Lion's drug stop also looked different once police began going back over Gerry's final weeks. In that time, he had been trying to work out who had tipped off the Gardaí and set the stop in motion. That made the June incident feel less like a random scare and more like something that may have been done to him deliberately.
Well, that suspicion was strengthened by what investigators later found. Phone records were said to show intense contact between Julie, Michael Monaghan, and Tony McNern around the Black Lion stop. So, with Gerry's movements apparently being passed along in real time. As the Gardaí waited to intercept him from near the border, the updates kept shifting with him. Which car he was in, why he was delayed, when he was finally on the road, and when he was nearing Black Lion. In that light, the stop no longer looked like chance information from some unknown source. It looked coordinated by people close to Gerry.
Oh, yeah. That for sure.
Yeah, there's definitely some sort of plan going on with the three of them.
Yep, there was somebody following him, going, yep, he's here, he's blah, blah, blah.
So it's like, what are their intentions on, informing each other where he is, what he's doing?
Yep. Well, as investigators dug even further, other details added to the picture. Witnesses said Julie and Monaghan were speaking as though police would get nothing from the vans, because Gerry had been in and out of them anyways. Police also found forged currency, English and Irish driving licenses bearing Julie McGinley's photograph, but the name Anne-Marie Martin, and a letter inquiring about emigrating to Australia. About to do the off-ski, as you say.
Yes. Well, so as all of that was being uncovered, the search for Gerry crossed the border. The RUC and the Gardaí shared information, followed reported sightings, and checked the places connected to his work and movements. But none of it led to him. Days turned into weeks and weeks into months. For Gerry's parents, the uncertainty became unbearable, and by then they were trying any avenue that they could for answers. But in the end, they even consulted a clairvoyant.
Yeah.
I mean, I've seen cases,
You'd be so
especially
desperate.
in America. A lot of people do it in America, to be fair.
Yep.
For missing people or what have you.
Yeah, you get so desperate.
It's like last
you're just
resort
like,
type.
yeah, you're like, I'll do anything.
Let's give this a go. It's worth a try. So
yeah. Meanwhile, Julie and Monaghan had already begun trying to move on with their life after Gerry's disappearance. They were already starting to build that life together in County Donegal, taking business premises there and later moving into a rented house with Julie's children and Patrick McPadden. Later reports placed them first in Donegal and then back in Enniskillen at Julie's father's home. But it didn't last. By late May 2001, Julie McGinley, Michael Monaghan, and Patrick McPadden had been charged with Gerry's murder.
Then, on the 3rd of June of 2001, the case changed completely. Human remains were found in woodland in the Auchnaishillen area of Ballina Moor in County Leitrim.
Auchnaishillen. Yes, you're close enough. That's good. That's a tough one.
That was a crazy looking word.
Yeah, you'd think that the Wales ones are bad. There's more in the Irish. They're coming for us.
Well, there was human remains found, and Amanda O'Connell and her sister had come upon them in a remote spot behind an uprooted tree and partially covered with black sheeting. The remains were badly decomposed and had been there for around 10 months.
As many times, like we're on episode 40 now.
Yeah.
As many times as we've seen a passerby found human remains, I'm like, I don't want to go for a walk.
Yeah. Yeah. Don't go walking in woodlands, I mean, these are the places that people tend to hide things, And especially like out there, you've got animals as well. So they might be buried for a little bit, but animals can come and dig them up and, scatter them about everywhere. So, yeah. Ooh.
Well, the area was sealed off while the Gardaí and the RUC tried to establish who had been found. Back in Manor Hamilton, Gerry's parents, Betty and Gerald Sr., were left waiting for news, hoping, however awful the truth might be, that they could finally lay their son to rest. That answer did not come immediately. Dental records were needed and DNA testing were also used before the remains were confirmed as Gerry's.
Once Gerry was identified, investigators now had a body, a dump site, and a clearer line back to the house where he had been last seen alive. By then, the stripped bedroom, the fires outside, the belongings left behind, and the calls between Julie and Monaghan had painted a damning picture.
Yep, it's all coming together.
Yep.
So, when they get to the postmortem, it made it clear just how violent the attack had been. The worst of the damage was to the right side of Gerry's face and head, with fractures spreading across the skull. Pathologists said that the pattern of injury suggested he had stayed in the same position throughout the attack, laying on his back. The weapon was never found, but the injuries were consistent with a heavy, rounded, blunt instrument, like a baseball bat, I'm guessing.
Yeah, it could have been, yeah.
Yep.
The investigation had done what it could. The next stage was court, where the prosecution would have to turn all of those fragments, the affair, the house, the lies, the body in Ballinamore, into a case the jury would accept.
When the case came to Laganside Crown Court in Belfast on the 16th of September of 2002, the Crown was clear from the outset that this was a circumstantial case. There was no confession, no eyewitness to the killing, and no piece just one piece of evidence that could carry the prosecution on its own. The jury was asked to stand back and look at the whole pattern.
Yeah. The prosecution's case was that Julie and Monaghan wanted to carry on their relationship as if Gerry McGinley had never existed, and that the affair sat at the heart of the motive. This was not a case built around one dramatic reveal. It was built around accumulation. The relationship, the clean-up inside the house, the body in Ballinamore, and the effort, as the Crown saw it, to make Gerry disappear.
A major part of that argument was the state of the room where Gerry had been killed. The jury heard that Gerry was said to have left wearing the same clothes he had bought the previous day and worn to the Fort Lodge. And the police later bought matching items and said debris from the fire matched them. Dr. Eileen Murphy's evidence also supported the prosecution's case. The attack would have caused blood spatter from the weapon and that the room would have been stripped and removed to be, so they can get rid of all that contamination.
Contamination, yeah.
Yep.
Because you can, you've seen blood spatter, if someone's sort of been hit, the blood will fly up, but it doesn't just come up from the actually impact spatter. It's going to come up when the person, if they're using, say, a baseball bat, for instance.
Yeah. It's going to be a strike and the sling.
And then a cast-off pattern. Yeah. So,
hey, we've all seen Dexter.
Yeah, exactly. So, that's a good show, that. Well, there was also witness evidence that gave the case a darker edge. Josephine McElroy said that Monaghan had spoken about Gerry in violent terms before the murder, calling him a psychopath and a schizo, and saying that McNern was going to get him sorted. She also said that he later complained that a man had got £500 and not done the job right, and that someone else would have to do it.
That's not suspicious.
No.
I paid this guy £500. He didn't get the job done.
Attempt,
Yeah. Fucking dumb.
Terrible.
This is where you go, yeah, criminals were dumb, and you're just so glad that they were dumb.
Yeah. Sometimes I don't get out. Can't just get my head around how dumb criminals are.
Oh, yeah.
And like how just they think that they're not going to be caught at all, and they just...
I mean, why do you think there was a series that was called World's Dumbest Criminals? Like, they're just dumb. Well, Patrick Owens gave similar evidence. He said Monaghan had suggested he had used McNern to threaten Gerry and had remarked that Gerry would be found, quote, pushing up the heather in a Leitrim mountain, which is the same expression as he's going to be pushing up daisies.
Yes.
Yep.
I.e. buried.
Yep. The trial also brought in forensic evidence linking Monaghan directly to Julie through a semen stain found on the mattress of the marital bed. That did not prove murder on its own, but it badly damaged any suggestion that the affair had only begun after Gerry had disappeared.
Yeah, so they can't say, oh, no, we didn't have an affair or any type of relationship intimately prior. Yeah, okay. Well, they found his semen.
Yeah, why's your stains on there then?
Exactly. Would you go in there, creep in there and just masturbate yourself, you weirdo? Anyway.
Jesus.
Well, there are people. I just read an article today that somebody here in England had broke into this lady's house, and she was obviously asleep, and he's broke into her house and he's sucking her toes. She's woke up to him sucking her toes.
What the fuck?
Yeah. I mean, there's some fucking weird-ass people out there.
True.
Stay out of people's houses if you ain't being invited. That's what my advice.
Don't suck toes then unless it's consent.
Jesus Christ. I mean, what a crime, Anyway, on this case, the defence went after the case where any circumstantial prosecution is most exposed. Suspicion, they argued, was not the same as proof. The evidence still did not show who had actually delivered the fatal blows. Gerry had other enemies, they suggested, and his death could not simply be laid at the feet of the two people in the dock. Julie did not give evidence, and Monaghan denied involvement.
So in the end, the jury's task was to decide whether the Crown's case, taken as a whole, had gone far enough. On the 3rd of December of 2002, it had. The jury returned unanimous guilty verdicts against Julie and Monaghan for the murder of Gerry McGinley.
Yeah, you know what that is? Juries are people like you and me, everyday people.
Yep.
But clearly with fucking common sense.
Yeah.
That's how you reach a verdict. Firstly, you need common sense.
Yes.
And then, Jesus, look at what circumstances were there, behaviours after the
fact.
Yeah.
What's prison like? That still gets me.
Madness. Members of Gerry's family wept in court, and two jurors, including the foreman, were also said to be in tears. Monaghan slumped with his head in his hands as the verdict was read, while Julie showed no emotion as she was led from the dock. At sentencing, Mr. Justice Kerr said that the exact circumstances of killing were not and might never be fully known. Not unless one of them opens their mouth.
Yeah. But he also made clear that the jury had been satisfied that both defendants had either taken part in the killing or procured others to do it. He described Gerry as having been in a vulnerable and defenseless position when the first blow was struck. He also called the murder callous and chilling, and stressed the added horror of it being carried out while two very young girls slept inside the house.
Yeah, that's sad. I mean, the poor guy being murdered in the bedroom near his children.
Yeah.
Both defendants received the mandatory life sentence. What remained was tariff. Mr. Justice Kerr said the murder had clearly involved planning, concealment, arming in advance, and the destruction of evidence. In the absence of clearer evidence, he treated it as an opportunistic killing, but not one that had come out of nowhere. In his view, it had been in the defendants' minds for at least some time beforehand. He considered mitigation in both cases, but found no proper reason to treat one differently from the other. So the tariff was set at 15 years each.
Not enough, in my opinion.
So this is the thing with me. I like that America, most parts of America do still have death penalty, because if someone takes somebody's life, they're gone for life.
Yeah.
And being in jail, you're still living, you're still enjoying some things, obviously, foods you like or whatever, watching TV. These people that you've murdered are not.
They're gone.
And the effects on their families is horrendous. So I do believe that there should always be some sort of life for life situation.
Well, 15 years is not.
No, it's not.
Not quite enough.
That's not life.
No.
See, and that's another thing with our justice system over here in the UK. They say, oh, yeah, life sentence. No, it's not, because you're only giving him 15 years. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? The way we look at it.
Like whenever you think of
15 years is not life.
Well, you got to think of like America. They go 25 to life.
Yeah.
That's like a lot of where it starts is like 25.
Yeah.
Before you can even be considered for parole.
Yeah. Well, the end of the trial did not bring quick closure for Gerry's family. Although his remains had been found in June of 2001, It was only after sentencing in March of 2003 that the funeral arrangements could finally go ahead. More than 2.5 years had passed since his death. Gerry was buried at St Clair's Church in Manor Hamilton, and hundreds attended. Very popular person, and very sad for...
I mean, yeah, he did some shady shit.
Yeah, but
and it was not cool.
He was still a businessman, would have been known well in the community.
Shouldn't have been killed for it.
Definitely not.
Well, after all the headlines and courtroom details, the funeral itself seemed to be marked less by spectacle than by exhaustion, grief, and endurance. More than anything, that tone came from Gerry's parents. At the service, the priest praised their dignity, their lack of bitterness, and their determination to see that the truth came out and justice was done.
Well, that stood in sharp contrast to the way that the case was often framed in public, where the affair, the blackmail allegations, and the, quote, Black Widow label tended to dominate. Gerry's family spoke in much quieter register than that. Outside court, his father said, and I quote, "I get no pleasure from this. We're not looking for vengeance." He also spoke about the two children, still very young at the time, and the fact that they would now have to grow up without either parent available to them in any ordinary way. That stayed with the case because it cut against the kind of triumph people sometimes expect after a conviction.
Yeah, they expect everybody to get up and cheer and all that.
Yeah. But you look at the impact and, how it's going to impact, especially the two children.
Yeah.
To lose both parents. Different ways, obviously, but they've then got to grow up. I mean, I remember I didn't grow up with my dad till I was like 15.
Yeah.
And I remember being in school and, they're talking about both their parents had taken them out and doing this or whatever. Or my dad does this for work or, I couldn't say that. So it was always a weird...
And they're like, well, where's your mom?
Yeah, exactly.
She's in jail. Well, where's your dad? Well, she killed him.
It's like, do you tell them, your friends the truth? Or people that you knew, making new friends with?
That'd be really tough.
Yeah, it'd be a really hard life for the children. But sounds like they've got a great family, the rest of the family, the grandparents and that have
helped them out.
Will step up and raise them right. So
yeah. Well, legally, though, the case did not end with the verdict. Julie and Monahan both challenged their convictions, but in 2006, the Court of Appeal dismissed those efforts. Later that same year, they were both refused leave to take the case to the House of Lords. They said, "Get fucked. You're staying in jail." The court found no point of law of general public importance that justified any further appeals. But the argument over Julie McGinley's role did not end there. By 2007, a campaign had emerged to have her conviction re-examined, with support from the Northern Ireland Human Rights Commission, prison chaplains, and the Belfast Rape Crisis Centre.
The case being advanced then was that Julie had been treated too simply in the original proceedings, not as a woman shaped by fear, coercion, and manipulation, but as a straightforward architect of murder. The aim was to have the conviction reconsidered by the Criminal Cases Review Commission, so what her supporters were really trying to reopen was not just the verdict itself, but the story that had formed it around it.
That campaign put forward a very different version of events. In that telling, Julie was not the driving force behind the killing, but a woman who later said she had been living in a coercive and abusive marriage. Her supporters argued that she had been manipulated, frightened, and pressured into sexual situations for years.
Julie and Monahan both maintained that the killing had not been planned and that she had not been in the bedroom when the fatal blow was struck. Julie did, however, admit to helping cover up what happened afterwards. It was a serious attempt to recast her role in the case, but whatever it changed in public discussion, it did not change the conviction.
Yep. What did continue to grow was Julie's public image. She became one of the most recognizable female offenders in Northern Ireland, not because the case was the largest in scale, but because it contained the kind of details that tend to stay in the public mind. The quote-unquote Black Widow label stayed attached to her long after the trial.
By 2015, those later developments had become controversial in their own right. After serving the tariff on her life sentence, Julie McGinley entered phased release from Hyde Bank Prison. Reports described her spending increasing amounts of time outside prison and also beginning a relationship with a former BBC producer.
Damn. Well, all right.
Well, she was said to be banned from Enniskillen, barred from contacting Gerry's relatives, and prohibited from drinking alcohol or entering licensed premises.
Jeez.
So she's obviously got conditions. I don't know whether... So obviously she was not allowed to contact Gerry's parents, so I don't know about whether there was a relationship
they're go
with the
through,
children.
They would probably go through the courts to say if she would be able to have contact with the kids or anything like that. But, well, even with those conditions, many people were angered by the sight of her appearing to build some kind of normal life again. That anger deepened when newspapers began publishing photographs of her in exactly those ordinary settings. Shopping, traveling from prison, spending time in her new partner's home in Belfast. The images were ordinary, and that was exactly what made them so hard for some people to accept.
By 2021, reports placed her in East Belfast, living quietly and running a dog-minding business. Customers were said not to know who she was, and neighbours too described as unaware of her past. That perhaps, in where the case left one of its deepest discomforts, Gerry remained permanently tied to the violence of his death, while Julie, however, controversially, was still able to move on from it.
Yep. She can go on with her life.
Yep.
Yeah, so that is where the case still lingers. Not simply in the murder itself, or even the convictions that followed, but in everything wrapped around it. The affair, the blackmail allegations, the secrecy, the lies, and the sense that some parts of what happened in and around that house were never fully brought into the light.
Nope. Because, well...
They're the only ones that know exactly what happened,
and
they ain't
if
saying
none of
shit.
them are actually coming out and saying exactly what happened, then there's never going to be a clear picture.
I tried to find whether Monahan he's probably gotten out by now as well. I mean,
I don't wish them well and don't wish them a great rest of their lives, to be fair. You know, but they have done their time and, you know,
no matter
that's
how
that,
little
basically.
it was.
Yeah.
Compared to what they fucking did.
I just hope that Gerry's family and friends and his children are having a good life, and despite the tragic circumstances around Gerry's death. That was the story of a body in the woods and the murder of Gerald McGinley.
Yep. Awful. Awful what happened to him.
Really brutal.
Just leave.
It's just
this is
so
where I go,
brutal.
just leave. Just if you and Monahan, if you want to just be like, you know what, fuck off.
There
I'm
was the
fucking off
passport
outta here.
in a different name, you know?
Yeah.
I mean, it seems like she was setting herself up to go off to Australia. Well, why didn't you just do that? Why do why do people feel that the only way to leave a marriage or a relationship is to, not everybody, obviously, but, you know, some people out there think that that's the only way to leave a relationship. It was
probably because of the kids. You'd have to fight in court over the kids.
So be it, you know, at the end of the day, they're his children as well. So, of course, that's just, part of the situation that you're going to have to deal with. It's a way that you look at things, isn't it? You know, a perspective on things.
Yeah.
And perspective is a major part in this, I think, you know.
They probably wanted to go off to Australia, and they're like, well, we can't do that until we get rid of him, so we can't
take the kids. And, more than likely, but
awful.
Still disgusting that people think, you know, results of murder. It's not the answer.
Yep.
Well, thank you very much for listening to this episode, guys. If you value the work that we do here in the archive, please follow the show and leave us a 5-star rating. It really does help these stories reach further and keep the archive growing.
Yeah. You can also support us on Patreon for ad-free episodes, bonus cases, 24-hour early access. Just head over to patreon.com/MurderMostBritishPodcast. And then follow us on TikTok and Instagram at MurderMostBritish and Facebook at MMB Podcast. And you can also join our public crypt, our free Discord community.
Everything you need, socials, Discord, Patreon is in the link tree below. Check it out.
So until next week, stay safe and stay curious.
Bye, guys. And girls.
And now for our patrons who are the Ravens Council, our top tier. We have Ruby Tucker 1956, Claire, Extreme Clunge, Whiskey 45, and Kelly. Thank you so much for your support. It means so much to us.
It definitely does. Keep on listening and tune in to next week's episode.
Yeah. Bye-bye.